I developed sudden arthritic hip pain with no prior history of hip issues, and it turned out to be due to an argument I was having with myself. I resolved it, however, through one dream incubation, and the pain never returned. Before I tell you my dream, let's dive into dream incubations a little bit. A dream incubation is essentially a directive that we put before our subconscious mind before heading off to sleep. We ask a precise question, we imagine a resolution, and then we go to sleep. We let our subconscious mind and our dream state take care of the rest. Now, I'm very familiar with mind, body, spirit modalities, and when this first occurred, I used some of them. I did some emotional clearing using something called the emotion code, and it worked for 48 to 72 hours. And then I used something like tapping, emotional freedom technique, and once again, it resolved for 2 to 3 days, and then it returned. And I quickly realized no matter how many times I cleared my field, I was still generating this energy that was creating this conflict in my body and showing up as discomfort in my left hip. Now, I'm a hypnotherapist, and so I'm familiar with some of these techniques, and I've seen this kind of transformation in my clients. So I went ahead and I did a dream incubation. That night, it had been about 2 weeks in, and I had a pretty good idea that the internal conflict was what was causing this issue. I had been arguing with myself about marketing for my website for one of my businesses. But my inner child, this other part of myself, was like, there's no point. It's not going to move the needle, and that's really boring. So this was the conflict that had been kind of going on the back burner of my mind, kind of like two kids fighting in the back seat. So that night before I went to bed, I said to Spirit, I request a therapeutic dream that gives me clarity, healing, and guidance on this hip. I think this is what it has to do with, but either way, I'm all ears. And then I imagined myself first person surfing, because in those days I used to surf a lot, and surfing implied that my hip was 100%. I went off to bed, and then I had one of the most powerful dreams of my life so far. We call these a clarity dream or a true dream in my world. And what happened was I returned from a tropical trip. I had gone on some kind of trip, I believe it was Costa Rica in the dream, and I had gotten home and I was unpacking my bag. I opened my suitcase and this exotic bird flew out of my bag and started banging around the room. This thing was freaking out. It was hitting the ceiling fan, the walls, and over I kept repeating the exact same phrase to it. I said, hey bird, calm down. I got you. I know the way out. Hey bird, I got you. Calm down. I know the way out. I don't know how many times I said it to this bird, but finally it shrunk down and acquiesced. It landed on the wall and it turned into something like a little dove. I gently picked it up, I opened the door, and I let it out. And when I did, it expanded into something like a 15, 20-foot wingspan phoenix, like a mythological exotic bird, something I've never seen on this planet. And it was so gorgeous as it flew off into the sunset, I started bawling. I just started crying intensely. And as many of you may have experienced in your dreams, when we have very, very intense emotion, it jolts us awake. So I awoke and I immediately started recording into my dream recorder. And while I was sobbing and recording this gorgeous dream, I just started getting a full-blown download from Spirit. And they were saying, do you understand now? You didn't come here to this world to do a bunch of boring human stuff. You came to be the exotic, beautiful bird that you are. You do you, and we will take care of the rest of that stuff. And then they said, as an aside, we are not going to be speaking goo goo gaga with you just like that bird. Right now, you happen to have a bird brain. You need to remember your native language of spirit. And that was because I had been grumbling, I remember, in the weeks prior about how cryptic Spirit was. Because when I was younger, when I needed help, sometimes they would just speak right into my mind and tell me what to do. And in those recent years, I wasn't getting those kinds of direct hits. So this really cleared up some confusion that I had and some of that grumbling, because I later became a full-blown reader and intuitive, because I learned to translate the native language of our souls, which is through symbolism and through feelings and through vibrations, and we translate it in a multitude of ways. So what happened was I woke up that day and that hip pain was completely gone. And I completely dropped the marketing thing. That's really what the dream was about. I had a feeling that's what the issue was, this internal conflict. but I didn't know how to put it down. So that was taken care of. What's interesting is that 2 weeks later, I woke up at an absurd hour, very early, 2, 3, 4 a.m., something like that. And I would never generally just jump on my computer and start working, but I did that day. And by afternoon, I had knocked out all of the marketing that I had intended and wanted to do. So this is a very, very beautiful example of how we can use this incredibly powerful technique, which is available to all of us. Dreams have been used by countless people in our history. Everyone from Paul McCartney, he shared, he got the melody for Yesterday from his dreams. Salvador Dali, many of his inspirations for his surrealist artwork also came from his dreams. I'm going to show a link to one of my artworks here. And this also came from a beautiful dream. And I'm going to dive into that now. In that dream, I was at my auntie's house and I went out to her garage in the dream. And all of a sudden, the garage cracked open and I entered a completely new dimension. From her garage, big, huge flower garlands started to float through the sky, and there were giant grassy fields and huge flowers, and it was incredibly lush and verdant and fertile. It honestly reminds me, the closest I've seen on this planet for something like that was kind of like the Nile. And I see in the distance there are 3 creatures. They look like kids from Burning Man wearing festival costumes. I'm thinking that they're dressed like butterflies. And so in my dreamlike state, I'm quite lucid at this point. I realize I'm in a dream. And I float up to these 3 people, and I think I see them doing party drugs. That's what I thought it was, because I see a bunch of powder on plates. And sure enough, I get up close and I get a telepathic message, and it's butterfly hybrids. These are some kind of interdimensional beings, and they look at me and they go, "No, dear, this is pollen off of fine china." So it was a big joke. But anyway, I woke up, and shortly thereafter, I sketched it out, and then I created this amazing digital illustration. You can find it at my shop. You'll find that information in the description box. So dreams are incredibly powerful. We can use them for our creativity. We can use them for inventions. We can use them for healing. And let's not waste our sleep. Our sleep is not an escape. It is a strategy. If you enjoyed this message today, share your beautiful energy, like, subscribe, share, and comment. I'd love to hear what kind of dreams you've had. And if you're interested in coaching, readings, or visionary art, you'll find that information in the description box. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next message.